to another video, Past Papers 101 with Miss Edwards. Today we'll be looking at the Human and Social Biology paper for May-June 2023. This paper consists of 6 questions and 2 sections, and all questions must be answered. So let's get straight into the paper. Section A. This question. First question. Prostate cancer is one of the main cancers that affects the male reproductive system. Name one other cancer that affects the male reproductive system. The answers could have been testicular cancer and penile cancer. So testicular cancer would be cancer of the testes, and penile cancer would be cancer of the penis itself. And that's just for 1 mark. So either of those would have given you that mark. Part 2 of the question, list 3 signs or symptoms of prostate cancer. The first one is burning sensation during urination, pain in the penis, blood in urine and semen, weak flow of urine during urination. And any 3 of those would have given you your 3 marks. The next part of the question says, identify 2 risk factors for developing prostate cancer. You could have said age, over 50 years old, or the lifestyle diseases if you have underlying conditions such as diabetes and hypertension. It can be hereditary, so there is someone in your family that had it, and there may be a greater risk of you developing that cancer. And also your race. Black men are more prone to prostate cancer than other races. And also the diet. So your diet can also lead to prostate cancer. Any 2 of those would have given you your 2 marks. Moving right along, part B of the question says, Table 1 shows the responses of men in the Caribbean to a survey about their beliefs concerning prostate cancer. So these are the results from the survey. You have the belief, and then if they strongly agree, they disagree, and strongly disagree. So the first belief, I can reduce my risk of getting prostate cancer. 7% strongly agree, 17% agree, 60% disagree, 16% strongly disagree. The next belief, prostate cancer testing is embarrassing for me. 28% of persons strongly agree, 49% agree, 14% disagree, and 9% strongly disagree. The next belief, prostate cancer cannot be treated once it is discovered. 19% strongly agree, 50% agree, 21% disagree, and 10% strongly disagree. And the final belief, only elderly men get prostate cancer. 61% strongly agree, 15% agree, 16% disagree, and 4% strongly disagree. Now it says, using the data in Table 1, state 3 reasons why the mortality rates for prostate cancer in the Caribbean are high. Now, mortality rates would refer to the death rate. So why is it that there is a high death rate for prostate cancer in the Caribbean? So reasons could have been that, for one, 61% of men believe that only elderly men get prostate cancer. So this is a big reason. So because such a large amount of males believe that only elderly men get it, if they start seeing some symptoms, they would not be quick to say that it's prostate cancer if they are not at a certain age. The next reason is 50% of men believe that prostate cancer cannot be treated once it is discovered. You have some men who are misinformed, so once they believe they have it, then it is a death sentence. So that could be the reason why the mortality rate is so high. They do not go in for treatment. The next reason, 49% of men agree that prostate cancer testing is embarrassing, and 28% strongly agree that it is embarrassing. So we have a large percentage believing that it's too embarrassing, so they do not go for testing. And we say all these reasons account for the majority of the responses given, which indicates that men are misinformed about prostate cancer. So any one of those reasons you could have used to support this fact that mortality rates for prostate cancer is high. The next part of the question says, at age 43, Paul, who is a husband and father of 3 teenage sons, was diagnosed with late-stage prostate cancer. He was treated for 2 years but eventually died. Suggest 3 ways in which Paul's early death could have impacted his family. Now, this word suggest, again, guys, is not from textbook. We are not looking for textbook responses. We're looking for responses that would naturally come from your own line of thinking. So suggestions are your own view, from your viewpoint. So I have here, for emotional issues, the children or the family would experience some emotional issues. The family would be stressed or saddened by the death of their family member and would leave them having mental and emotional issues, right? So they would be going through the grieving process. The second way in which his death could impact the family is financial problems. Since Paul died, leaving 3 teenage sons, right, they may be faced with financial problems, as the main source of income would have been from their father, or one of the main sources of income would have been from their father's work. So if he passes away, more than likely less money is going to come into the house, so they're going to go through financial problems, and then, you know, maybe they'll have to spend for the funeral, etc. And then the last point I have is socially. So the children may be forced to drop out of school in order to work to provide for themselves or to help with the household expenses, and this would cause the children to lose out on completing their education, which would later on affect their quality of life. You could still say so many more things. You could say socially they may be looked down on in society by some of their peers to say, oh, your father died. It could leave them feeling anxious with mental issues. So socially it could have a lot of negative effects on their part. So if you had any other answer, if this was the paper you did, well, then if you see that it aligns with what could happen in real life, where when someone passes away it impacts the family, and you wrote that, more than likely you got it right. Alright, so any one of those or additional points would have gotten your 3 marks. The next part of the question says, recommend 3 strategies that governments can utilize to help Caribbean men overcome their fears and misbeliefs about prostate cancer. The first one is that the government can educate the public on prostate cancer through health campaigns or TV advertisements. So whenever they ask about strategies that the government can use to help, one thing that we always draw for is public education. So if you educate the public on the subject or the topic, then when the people become more informed, they can have a change in their behavior. So educate the public. The second one, the government can create a mandate that states that males at the age of 40 must have a prostate check every year. So in some countries, there are rules that once you reach a certain age, you should go in for routine checkup because you're now more at risk for certain diseases because of your age. So if the government can put a mandate in that once you reach the age of 40, you should go in for checkups, that could also help to increase the knowledge that men would have or reduce their fears toward prostate cancer. 3, the government can provide cash incentives to encourage males to do prostate tests. So I know that this one may be far-fetched, but a lot of persons are encouraged by money. So if you tell males that, hey, come in to do your checkup, and then you would get like a little stipend, depending on the country you're watching from, you would know what would, warrant a small amount of money, maybe something that could buy them a little meal, just something to encourage them. Males would actually go in to do the test, so a little monetary incentive would help. And I also gave an additional one because that's me. If I have more answers, I give. So the government could also hold health fairs to provide free checkups for males within the community. So sometimes males have the fear of going to the doctor, so if maybe the government actually brings the doctor to the males in the community, it would reduce some of those fears that they have. So any three of those 3 marks. And again, if you had wonderful suggestions, then you would have gotten your full 3 marks. We're on our way. So we're at question number 2. So we're on the subject now, or the topic of meiosis and mitosis. So we have the 2 processes here, meiosis at the top and mitosis at the bottom. So the question asks, from figure 1, state one similarity between meiosis and mitosis. Now I have 2 responses there that you could have chosen. Both processes involve cell division, and both processes involve copying of DNA. So if you had any one of those responses, then you would have gotten your 1 mark. Or if there is another similarity you saw, well, fine, there should have been a mark for you. The second part of the question says you should outline one difference between meiosis and mitosis. Now I have 2 differences here. Now for meiosis, 4 daughter cells are produced, while in mitosis only 2 daughter cells are produced. And for another difference would be, for meiosis, the daughter cells are genetically diverse, meaning there is genetic variation, but for mitosis, daughter cells are genetically identical. So those would have been your differences. If you had any other difference, then fine, because you could have also said that the daughter cells in meiosis would be haploid, while the daughter cells for mitosis would be diploid. Go back to your notebooks and check, because there are other differences as well. So any one of those would have given you your 2 marks, or would give you 2 marks. The next part of the question, it says figure 2 shows 2 types of cells, cell A and B, that are found in human body. So we have cell A on the left and cell B on the right, and you should be able to figure out what these cells are. Now the first part of the question asks, identify the cell in figure 2 which is produced as a result of meiosis. The answer would have been cell B, and that cell there is a sperm cell. And the part 2 of the question, explain why meiosis is important in the production of the cell identified in BI above. Now the reason why the cell B is a result of meiosis is because it is a gamete, it's a sex cell. And remember, gametes are involved in reproduction, fertilization, the process of getting a new offspring. So meiosis causes these gametes to have haploid number of chromosomes, so that when the egg and the sperm fuse, the new organism will have the total number of chromosomes, which is 46 chromosomes or 23 pairs. So the number of chromosomes is halved, so that when it fertilizes the female egg, the new organism will have the correct number of chromosomes. That's the reason, guys. Next part of the question, that would have been for 2 marks. This question, for those of you who did this paper for your examinations, I guess when you saw these pictures, you were wondering what this question was going to be about. So let's look at the question. It says figure 3 shows images of homozygous female and a heterozygous male Dalmatian dog who have mated to produce offspring. So we have the female parent, which is homozygous, and we have the male parent, which is heterozygous. Now do a little quiz for yourself. Homo would mean same, hetero means different. So let's look down and see what other information they give us. It says, using the information below, draw a Punnett square to determine the possible genotypes of the offspring which would be produced from the Dalmatian parents in figure 3. So the question is asking you to find out the genotype of these children when this male and this female mate. Now, they give us some more information. It says the dominant allele for black spot color is capital B. Now, up here, which parent is black? Has black spots? That would be the male. And so black is dominant. And it says down here, recessive allele for brown spot color is common B. So which parent up here is brown? It would be the female parent. Now, based on your knowledge of reproduction of genetic cross, right, we have to assign alleles for the female parent, for the genotype, and also the male parent. So we have to use the keys they give us. So they say the female parent is homozygous, meaning same, and she is brown in color or has brown spots. So it says the recessive allele for brown spot color is equal to common B. So if it says homozygous, which means same, and she's brown, and it says the recessive allele for brown is common B, then that would mean the female parents alleles would be, or genotype would be, 2 common B's. Remember, the only way the recessive trait is shown in the phenotype is if there is homozygous recessive alleles present. And then it says the male parent is heterozygous, and he has black spots. Now down here we find out that black spot color is capital B, which is dominant. Hetero means different. So this means that the male parent has a dominant allele, but also has a recessive allele. So hence the hetero, because they are different. Now coming down, we have assigned the genotype for the female parent, which would be 2 recessive alleles, and for the male parent we have a dominant allele and a recessive allele. So we have the black and the brown allele for the father, but only brown alleles for the mother. So let us draw a Punnett square to see how the children or how the offspring would turn out based on their genotype. So drawing a Punnett square, guys, remember you have to put the one parent at the top of the Punnett square and one parent's allele at the side of the Punnett square. So at the top, going across, I have the male. So I have separated his alleles. I have put the dominant allele here, and I've put the recessive allele over this side. And then for the side coming down, I've placed the mother's alleles. So I've separated one recessive gene from the other, or one recessive allele, sorry, from the other. So now we can cross. We can do the genetic cross. So we have a dominant allele here coming and intersecting with a recessive allele. So this first child would have a dominant allele and a recessive one. The second child would have, I have it messed up here. This second child would be double recessive because we have common B here and common B here. Good. Then we move down to the second allele. We have common B here. We have common B here and capital B here. So we are going to put the dominant gene ahead of the other one, and then we have common B here, common B, which are intersecting, sorry, which would give us our 2 recessive alleles. So for our Punnett square, the children's genotypes would turn out to be, we have 2 children who are heterozygous for black spot color, capital B, common B, and we'd have 2 children which are homozygous for the recessive allele or the recessive gene for brown spot color. So those would have been the genotypes for the children. So 2 would be heterozygous just like the father or the male parent, and 2 would have the same genotype as the mother. Hopefully you were able to understand that. Now the second part of the question says, in Dalmatian dogs there are only 2 colors for their spots, black or brown. Identify this type of variation and state 2 examples of this type of variation seen in humans. So the type of variation seen is discontinuous variation, because there are only a few options. There is no in between. It's either or either. So examples in humans would be the blood group or blood type. There are only 4 distinct blood groups or types that one can have. There is no in between. The rhesus factor, you either have it or you don't. The sex, it's either your chromosomes are gonna be XY or XX, male or female. We know about genetic mutations, but the sex is determined either by those 2 specific alleles, either the X or the Y. The earlobe, the shape of the earlobe is also 1. It's either dangle or attached. The next one is tongue roller. It's either you can roll your tongue or you cannot. And eye colors, there are a few distinct alleles that are responsible for your eye color. So those are some examples. The next part of the question says, one of the offspring of the Dalmatians was completely white. Explain what caused the absence of color to occur. So more than likely, this dog would have albinism, and this could be due to a genetic mutation where the alleles for black spots are suppressed and are not expressed in the phenotype. I should have said black and brown spots. So he does not have any expression of the alleles because of the genetic mutation. All right, moving right along. And that would have been for 2 marks. Next question. We're at question 3. List 3 substances transported by blood. And the first one is there, oxygen. We have nutrients or glucose. Water is also transported by blood. Hormones, antibodies, and if you think of anything else, it could have been added. So any 3 of those, once it is transported by the blood, you could have gotten your full 3 marks. All right, moving right along. It says state one function of each of the following components of blood. We have white blood cells. They fight against diseases by producing antibodies to fight against infections or by engulfing pathogen. Plasma consists of the water that enables blood to flow through veins, and it also transports substances such as the nutrients, the proteins, the hormones around the body. Platelets consist of clotting factors that help to cause blood to clot in order to prevent bleeding. If you remembered those functions, then you would have gotten your 3 marks. Tanisha is carrying out a blood test in a medical laboratory. This is the next part of the question, guys. It says identify the reagent she should use to test for glucose in the blood. Now guys, once it's asking you to test for glucose, whether it's in the blood or otherwise, remember food tests, right? Benedict's solution is used to test for glucose. So that would have been the answer there. And it says if there is a glucose present, state the color of the precipitate that would be observed. The answer should have been dark orange or red. So if you had dark orange, I think you get the mark. red, you'd get the mark. So that's 1 mark. The next part of the question says, Leon has a deficiency in a particular vitamin. He cut his arm in an accident and his wound would not stop bleeding. Identify the vitamin that Leon is lacking and explain its role in preventing excessive blood loss. Which vitamin comes to mind when you think about blood? The answer would have been vitamin K. He lacks vitamin K. Vitamin K helps to make various proteins such as prothrombin that are needed for blood clotting and the building of bones, which are also the site for the production of blood cells. So vitamin K is what is lacking, and it is because that vitamin K helps to make those clotting factors or proteins. So that's why his body is his wound is not healing. Figure 4 shows the blood cells found in Leon's twin sister Dion, who is often very tired. So those are Dion's blood cells, and if you look at the image, you should be seeing this distinct one here and another one over here. Based on the shape of it, it says suggest the disease that Dion is suffering from and explain why she often feels tired. So it says suggest the disease that she's suffering from and explain why she often feels very tired. So if you looked at the image, you should have said that Dion is suffering from sickle cell anemia. That's the disease. Remember, the blood cells are shaped like a C, so that's a sickle-celled red blood cell. So the reason why she often feels very tired, sickle cells are deformed red blood cells, and as such they die earlier than healthy cells, and this causes a constant shortage of red blood cells which are needed to transport oxygen. Thus there is always an oxygen shortage, and this is what causes the fatigue. So that's why she's always tired. She's not getting as much oxygen as she should. Now question 4, we're on our way, guys. It says define the term balanced diet. Now a balanced diet is one consisting of foods from all the food groups in the correct proportions to meet nutritional needs. If your teacher taught you something else and it's along these lines, then you would have gotten your 2 marks. If you saw a definition in a textbook that you put to memory and it sounds something similar to this, well, you should have gotten it marked. The part they look for is the fact that it's from all the food groups and in the correct proportions to meet nutritional needs. All right. The next part of the question says macronutrients and micronutrients are required for good health. State one function of each of the following nutrients in the body. And I know you guys know this. So the first one is proteins. Why are proteins important, or what is their function? Proteins aid in the growth of new cells and in the repair of worn out tissues and muscle cells. So if you know that you are someone who does a lot of workout, or when you see persons going to the gym, they always use a lot of protein powder, this is why. So it's for worn out tissues and growth of muscles. Vitamin A. Vitamin A is for healthy eyes and improved vision. Iron is for the formation of hemoglobin in red blood cells. Calcium is for the formation of strong bones and teeth. So if you remembered any one of those functions, then you should have gotten a mark for it. And if you remembered everything, then that's a total of 4 marks. The next part of the question says, Mrs. Barton prepared a meal of peas and rice and fried chicken for her family's dinner. Identify the 2 Caribbean food groups missing from the meal. Now, the only 2 missing from the meal based on the Caribbean food groups would be fruits and vegetables. Now, if you had put food from animals, that wouldn't be incorrect because we have fried chicken. Fats and oils would also be in the fried chicken because oil is used to fry the chicken, and carbohydrates or staples would be from the rice. So fruits and vegetables are the only 2 missing, and that is a 2 mark question. The next part of the question says, Mrs. Barton has 16-year-old twin girls, Kelly and Mandy. Kelly is very active and trains daily as she is on the track team, and Mandy spends all her free time sitting at the computer playing games. It says recommend 2 ways in which the twins' diets should differ, stating 1 reason for each recommendation. Now, what I have here is my first recommendation. I talk about the portion sizes. Now, let's look at the difference. Why is the reason for that recommendation? So, Mandy, her diet should consist of smaller portions of food since she is less active and does not require large amounts of calories. She's not doing much, so her portion sizes should not be large. Kelly, on the other hand, would have larger portions of food in order to supply her body with a good amount of nutrients in order to meet her needs for athletics. So just as when athletes are training, they usually bulk up on their protein-filled foods, a lot of fruits and vegetables. So her portion sizes would be larger because she's working, she's using her body. So she needs that fuel to do what she needs to do. Now, nutrient requirements is my other reason. Now, looking at the nutrients, what nutrients would each sister need more or less of? So Mandy, right, she would need less carbohydrates and fats in her diet, as the excess carbohydrate and fat would be stored in her body, leading to obesity since she is not physically active. But Kelly, on the other hand, would require large portions of carbohydrates for energy and protein for repair of worn out tissues and creation of muscles due to her physical activity. So if you had made a recommendation, or if you would make a recommendation, you have to explain the reason behind that recommendation. So if you wrote something similar to this, then fine. As long as you gave something and explained it, you should have gotten some marks for this question. Next part of the question says, Kelly and Mandy are very worried about their friend Brian. Even though he is quite slender, Brian believes that he is too fat. He eats very small amounts of food and he keeps losing weight. Suggest the disease that Brian is suffering from and state 2 other signs or symptoms he may exhibit. Now, the disease that should come to mind is anorexia nervosa. Now, if you only said anorexia, it's fine, but the proper term is anorexia nervosa. His symptoms could be fatigue, headaches, body aches, and any other thing. I think there are cases where persons have nosebleeds. So if you remember any other symptoms, guys, then and you put them there, more than likely you've gotten the mark. And the disease, if you remember the disease, then that should have been a mark for you. Question 5, and we're at section B, and section B is about the environment. So let's go. Dominic's class visited a landfill to observe its operation. He was pleasantly surprised to see how different the landfill was compared to the dump near his house. It says outline 1 difference between a dump and a landfill. So first of all, a dump is an open piece of land or hole where garbage is left to decompose that usually harms the environment, while a landfill is an area built for the disposal of garbage, and it's structured in a way which does not harm the environment. So dumps and landfills, those are one of the main differences between both of them. The next part of the question says state 2 processes that occur in a landfill, giving 1 reason why each process is carried out. Now, I have the 2 processes here that I wrote. If you have any other process that you know for a fact that is occurring in a landfill, then you could have written it. So I have bacterial decomposition, and this is where the fungi and the bacteria help to break down the organic matter in the landfill, making the amount of garbage less. This also is used as fertilizer for the soil. And then the second process is compacting, and this is when heavy machinery are used to compact the garbage in the landfill. And the reason for this is because it reduces the space, or sorry, it increases the space which would make room for other waste material. So it reduces the and increases the space. Reduces the garbage and increases space in order to make room for other waste material. All right. The next part of the question says the garbage collection from Dominic's village is very unreliable. As a result, the villagers dispose of their garbage in a nearby dump. Dominic and his relatives plan to set an example by reducing the amount of garbage thrown away in their households. First part of the question asks you to recommend 5 ways in which Dominic's family could reduce the amount of garbage thrown away. So I have a lot of answers. I have a lot of suggested answers that you could have put, or you can put for your response. So the first one is compost organic material such as food scraps and leaves. Reuse bottles and jars for storage instead of throwing them away after use. 3, you could avoid buying single-use utensils such as the plastic forks, the spoons, or the paper plates. 4, you could use recyclable grocery bags. 5, give old clothes away so you don't throw them away. And 6, repair broken appliances where possible to reduce your electronic waste. So even though it asks for 5, I gave you 6. If you had anything along those lines, or if you thought along those lines, then fine. Even though it would be okay to just say reduce, reuse, and recycle, because they ask you for 5, you have to think how you would recycle or reuse or reduce. And in this case, they're asking you specifically for reduce, so you'd have to tell them exactly how you would go about reducing that waste. All right, and that would have been for 5 marks. So if you did not give all 5, you would have gotten the amount of marks for however many recommendations you gave. The next part of the question asks us to suggest 2 social benefits and 2 economic benefits that would be gained or could be gained from reducing the amount of garbage thrown away. So the social benefit would be that it prevents pollution, and this would reduce the amount of harm done to the environment and the people. And 2, it preserves natural resources. So this would reduce the demand for new raw materials such as products, and the products would have longer shelf life. So if you're not going out there to look for new natural resources, then you will have to take care of the product you have, because you would not be getting a new one anytime soon. And the economic benefits would be 1, it would cut the cost of waste management, because if there is less garbage being produced, then the country would not, or the government would not have to spend as much money on garbage collection and the construction of new landfills. And 2, it also creates jobs. Persons can become creative in the ways they recycle old materials, thus creating jobs for persons in a community. Example, using old plastic bottles to make bricks for building construction. So if you thought about any social benefit, any economic benefit, and you were able to just give a brief explanation of how it would actually benefit people or the country, then you would have gotten your 4 marks. And we are at the final question, guys. The circulatory system is made up of the heart, the blood vessels, and blood. It does not depend on the nervous system for its impulses, but instead generates its own impulses. Identify the structure in the heart which is responsible for the generation of impulses and and state in which chamber of the heart it is located. So the structure is called the sinus node, and the location is in the right upper chamber or the right atrium. So if you had that, you would have gotten your 2 marks. Part B to the question asks, Poor lifestyle practices can contribute to the development of atherosclerosis, which can lead to high blood pressure. Describe how atherosclerosis causes an increase in an individual's blood pressure. Now, atherosclerosis is the hardening of the blood vessels due to the buildup of fat, which is also called plaque, and as a result of eating foods high in fats and oils. When the arteries are blocked by these fat deposits, then it limits the blood flow, which results in hypertension. I always say to my students, think about hypertension as a water hose, and when it is turned on at full pressure, the water is coming out at a certain rate. But if you take your finger and you block part of that hose, the opening of the hose, the water actually shoots out faster and goes further, because the same amount of water now needs to go through or get through that opening. So you have increased pressure. So that is what happens in our arteries once there is a buildup of fat there. The next part of the question asks us to identify one poor lifestyle practice that can contribute to the development of high blood pressure. Now, one poor lifestyle practice would be lack of exercise or diet rich in fats and salty food. So if you say poor diet or lack of exercise, you should have gotten your 1 mark. The next part of the question says, it is often said that an obese child results in an obese adult. Discuss the link between obesity in children and hypertension in adults, and suggest one way in which the incidence of both of these lifestyle diseases can be reduced. Now, children who are obese are going to become used to a certain diet rich in fats and sugars combined with less exercise. They may continue this lifestyle into their adulthood, which would cause fat that has been deposited in the artery for years to now result in blockage and then cause hypertension. So that's where we have the link. So you'd have to explain how these children, or how this obesity in children would result in hypertension in adults, and that's exactly what happened. So if you explain something along these lines, you should have gotten your full marks. And then the other part of the question asks us to suggest one way in which the incidence of both of these lifestyle diseases can be reduced. So one way in which the effects of obesity and hypertension can be reduced is through exercising, which would aid in burning fat and reducing weight gain, as well as improved blood circulation. And if you didn't say exercising, you could have spoken about the diet, say changing their diets to include healthier meal options, and that would have been for 5 marks. The next part of the question, and I think it's the final part, a consistently elevated blood pressure is as a result of the heart working much harder than usual to pump blood through the body. Explain the changes that occur in the heart due to a consistently elevated blood pressure. So chronic hypertension puts a strain on the heart and makes it harder for it to pump blood. Since blood is not being pumped properly, this can lead to the formation of clots in the blood. It also causes the heart muscle to get thick and weak, and this can possibly lead to heart failure. Another thing that can happen in the heart is that the walls of the blood vessels can become weak and become blocked if cholesterol collects inside the openings. And this can cause a heart attack or increases the risk of stroke. So those are changes which occur in the heart due to consistent high blood pressure, and that would have been for 4 marks. And that was the end of the human and social biology paper for 2023. All the best on the rest of your examination, guys, and remember, all results can be distinctions.